So now, for this second lecture today, I'm going to start introducing some basic aspects and problems in supervised learning. Supervised learning covers regression and classification, but I'm going to start by talking about some basic concepts and then focusing on regression because it gives us a visually more simple, intuitive way of understanding the steps of how we figure out a model, of how we decide how to find the best hypothesis and so forth. So let's start with some basic concepts. First, we have in supervised learning a set of labeled data. And this means that we have a set of examples. For each example, we have some x. This is a vector of features. So you can think of as a series of numbers. It can be measurements or something like that that describes the example. And this is what we in the future are supposed to receive in order to make our prediction. So suppose that we want to predict the price with which we'll be able to sell a house. The x could be something like the location, the number of rooms, the area of the house, if it has a garden or not, things like that. The y is the target value, which will be the price of the house. So in our training set, in our set of labeled data, we not only have the x, the features of the examples, but also the y, the value that we're trying to predict. And this is the data set that we're going to use to train the model. And because we have this target value, we can supervise the learning of the model while it tries to find the best hypothesis, and we can use that to measure some error and so forth. So we're going to assume that somewhere in the universe there is some function that makes it so that if the example has some features, some x, it will have this y. For example, there is some relation between the location of the house, the year it was built, the number of rooms and so forth, and the price. We don't know what that relation is, so this is this f function, something we don't know, but this is what we would like to approximate in order to predict the price of the house. So this is what would be the goal of our supervised learning. We have this function g, which as inputs the features of whatever we're trying to predict. So for example, a house, and we'll map these features into the y, what we're trying to predict, which is the price in this case. In addition, it has this theta. This represents a vector of parameters, which is what we can adjust in order to cover the hypothesis class. So the hypothesis class is the set of all hypotheses that we're considering. The model is an expression that represents this hypothesis class as we change some parameters. And what we want to do is to adjust these parameters so that the hypothesis that we get approximates as much as possible this unknown function that relates the features to what we're trying to predict. So this is the idea of the supervised learning problem. What we want is to obtain these theta values in a way that this function of x will now be as close together as that f of x. So this would be the ideal, the goal would be to approximate this function x, this function f of x for all possible x's. So if we approximate the function that relates characteristics of a house to the market price, we want to be able to apply this to any house, not just the houses for which the price is already known, because that is not very useful. We already know the price, we don't need to predict it. What we want to do is to apply to all possible houses so we can predict the price of the other house. So this would be our goal. We want to apply to everything. But we only have this data set. So we cannot actually measure the error of our predictions for new houses that are outside the data set because we don't know the actual price of those houses. We can only measure the error within the data that we know. So this, as you can imagine, is a bit of a problem, but we are going to ignore it for now, and we're working only within our training set. Let's ignore for now what happens outside. So the training set is the data that we use to adjust the parameters of the model and find the best hypothesis. Basically, that's what the training set is used for, to choose a hypothesis. The training error, or empirical error, also called sample error by Mitchell, is the error that we can actually measure. So it's the error on this training set that we have, on the data that we have here. We'll see this can be a bit more sophisticated because we can do other things with our data set, but now we are assuming that we're going to use all our data for training and we are ignoring all those complications. So this training error is the error measured on the training set. For now we're going to consider this particular problem, which is to predict the y values. We have the x, we want to predict the y. These y values are continuous, so it's a regression problem, and we're going to minimize the error of the prediction. We have this set of data. So for now we're going to focus on regression, but just to remind you, there is this other possibility, classification. So if the y is continuous, which is what we're going to see now, we are doing a regression because we're trying to find this function g that approximates some function in a way that our predictions are as close together, as close to the target values as possible. So we can imagine that we have those target values that we know, pooling our predictions toward them, and we're trying to fit everything as close as possible. This is a regression problem when we're trying to predict something that is continuous. A classification problem is conceptually different because the target values that we have are discrete classes. For example, the email is spam or is not spam, and we don't really want to pool our data there. We want to split our data apart into those two classes. So it's a different problem in where we're trying to cut our data into different subsets. But we're going to look at regression now, and let's see an example. We're going to look at linear regression, and actually fitting a polynomial, although the polynomial is not a straight line, is an example of a linear regression, and we're going to try to get an intuition of why this is so. But let's start with a straight line. Let's suppose that we have a set of points. We have the x values, and the x will somewhat determine the y value. So we want to find an hypothesis that allows us to predict the y value given the x value. And let's consider this hypothesis class of all the straight lines that we can represent in this model. So the y value will be theta 1 multiplied by x. This theta 1 tells us the slope of the line, plus a theta 2 that tells us where the line is placed at. So how can we find the best line? Suppose that these red dots here are our data, the data that we know, and there are lots of possible lines that we can draw here. So how can we tell what is the best line? Remember that for a machine learning problem, we need to have the idea of a task, but we also need to be able to measure performance in order to improve the performance of the system in that task. So we need to have some kind of measure that tells us if a line is better than the other one, and we can use that to find the best line. Yes, the hypothesis class is all the straight lines, and we are representing it here in this model. Okay?
But how do you say how we can measure it?
Yes, that's what I'm going to talk about now. So, how can we create a measure for figuring out which is the best line? We'll start with some assumptions about what we think is going on here. So let's suppose that from where we are taking our data, the universe where we obtain these data points, there is some function, we don't know, this f, the unknown f, that relates the x value, the one here in the horizontal axis, to the y value. So the y, there is a reason why this point is here and this one is further below and so on, and it depends on this position along the axis. However, we also assume that there is some random error here. It could be because when we're measuring y, we are doing some small mistakes on the measurement, we have some error bars, or it could be that there are some random effects that are also influencing, and so besides this f, there is also some randomness associated here. But note that we are assuming that the y value is a function of x plus some error. There is no error on the x. The error is affecting the y value. This is what we're assuming here. And we are assuming that this error has a normal distribution centered on 0, so it can go to positive or negative, either way, and it has some variance here, this sigma squared. So we don't know what it is, but we assume that it's centered on 0, and it can influence some points up, some points down, and it has this bell-shaped distribution. So it's more likely to be in the center and less likely to be further apart. So given some points, we can, given this data set, we can try to estimate the joint probability of our data. That is, the probability of, if this is true, extracting from the universe a set of data points, and they are coming up more or less in this shape. We can estimate this probability by multiplying for all our data sets the probability of each pair of values, so of each example that we have here. And since the joint probability of two random variables can be written as the conditional probability of one given the other multiplied by the other, so this is basic probability. I'm not going to demonstrate this, but basically the probability of two things occurring is the probability of one of those things occurring if the other has occurred, multiplied by the probability of the other occurring. So we can rewrite this in this way. This would be the probability of the data that we are observing, of extracting the data from the universe, would be this product of all these conditional probabilities for all the data points multiplied by the probability of x for all the data points. So this is just the basic. Why do we want this? Let's look at this in a bit more detail, but I'm giving you this detour to explain the idea of maximum likelihood. So this seems a bit strange that we are looking at the probability of the data when the thing that we want is to adjust the parameters. So why are we looking at the probability of the data if we already have the data? And the reason for this is that if you have a frequentist interpretation of probability, probability is the frequency with which some event happens if you repeat the experiment infinite times. So you say that there's a 50% probability of the coin falling with heads up, because if you throw the coin infinite number of times, half of those it will fall with heads up. This is the idea of probability in a frequentist interpretation. But given this interpretation, we can only apply probability to something that is random. In our case, the data points that we have are a random sample from the universe of all possible data points. We can imagine that if we were to repeat everything, if we went back in time and obtain a new set of data points, they will fall more or less in the same shape, but they will not be exactly the same because we are drawing them at random from all possible data points. However, if we find the parameters, that theta, that best approximates the f, the unknown f function, that is not a random variable. There are some set of values for those parameters that are the best ones, and they only depend on what the f is, and f is not something that changes when we go back in time. It's always the same relation between the values. So this is the idea. The data that we have is a sample that we drew at random from the universe, but the parameters that we are computing are really those values. They are not random values, they are not random events. So that's why we can talk about the probability of the data, but not the probability of the parameters. That would not make sense. So basically, if you want to tell if the coin is bent, you can compute the probability of the coin falling, for example, 70 times heads and 30 times tails, and figure out that that is a very low probability if it was not bent. But you cannot compute the probability of the coin being bent because it's either bent or not. It's not something that is randomly changing. It's actually what the coin is. Okay? So that's the idea here. And this is why we use likelihood. So basically, the likelihood of the parameters is the probability of the data if those parameters are correct. If those are the real values that approximate the f, then we can compute some probability for the data. And we can have some intuition here, is that the best set of parameters are those that make the data more probable. So if you are trying to figure out what is the parameter that describes the probability of the coin falling heads, it should be something that makes it more probable to get what you are observing. If you, for example, have 70 times the coin fell heads and 30 fell tails, and if you say that the probability of heads is 5%, then this would be very unlikely. It would be very improbable that the coin would fall there. So we're going to adjust the parameters to maximize the probability of the data. In other words, to maximize the likelihood of the parameters. The likelihood of the parameters is the probability of the data, assuming that the parameters are correct. Okay, so how can we use that? We want to find the line here with the parameters that have maximum likelihood. We know that the likelihood is the probability of the data. We can write the probability of the data in this way. And we know that the conditional probability of having some value y given x will depend on the parameters. This is what we're trying to predict here. Okay, we have this g function that given x will tell us the value y that we want to predict. However, the parameters have nothing to do with the probability of some x coming in our data. So we can actually ignore this part and focus only on the conditional probability. The maximum value, the value of theta that will maximize this function here, will be the same as the one ignoring the x. Also, we can use the logarithm of the likelihood, because the maximum of the function also corresponds to the maximum of the logarithm. And this is useful both for the products there and because of the shape of the error function that we are assuming. So let's do this simplification here. We throw away the x, we have this, and now what is the probability of having some y value here given the x that we have? We can go back here and we see that there are two components to this. So we have something that we are approximating with our g function, and then some error that is normally distributed and will affect the value that comes out given that x. So we can put that in here, and we replace this with basically the actual value that we're measuring minus the prediction from our function. So the difference between these two, if our function g is approximating f, the difference between the value that we are predicting, remember that g approximates f, so this would be the value that we're predicting. The difference between this one and y would be the error that has a normal distribution. So we can put that here, so the difference between the two will have this distribution. This is the expression for the normal distribution, and this will allow us to estimate the probability of having that shape of points in our sample from the universe, assuming that our function is correctly parameterized. So now we simplify this. Since we have the logarithm there, the exponential there, and the product, we can cut away a lot of things here. Also, remember that we are only trying to find the maximum value. So there are some constants here that we can take away and still give us the same position for the maximum. And eventually we come down to this expression. So maximizing the likelihood is the same as minimizing this expression here, because the sign there changed the direction of the optimization. And this expression is the quadratic error, is the sum of quadratic errors between the value that we have in our data, the epsilon for each, the y value for each point, and our prediction with those parameters. So basically, under these assumptions, what we want to do to optimize the position of the line, so to find the parameters, is to minimize the quadratic error between the line and the points. This ends up being quite simple, and this is a very intuitive measure. You probably already heard about those to do, for example, linear regression. You minimize the quadratic error and so on. But it comes from these assumptions that we made. So under these assumptions, the maximum likelihood for our parameters is the minimum squared error. We can compute by summing the square of the value that we have observed for each data point minus the prediction that our hypothesis is making. If we do this for different hypotheses, we have an idea of which one is better and which one is worse. Just a side remark here, it's often the case that we'll find the error written in this way. So with 1/2 here. This is actually equivalent because the value of theta that minimizes this expression is the same that minimizes this one. You're just multiplying by a constant. But this is convenient for the derivatives because when you compute the derivative, this 1/2 will cancel the 2 there and you get a more convenient expression. So you'll often see the quadratic error written as 1/2 of the quadratic error, but it doesn't change anything. It's just convenient for the derivative because of the way we do the minimization posteriorly. So this is how we're going to find the best line. So we have this, we need to minimize this to find the best line, and you can imagine that we can represent the error as a function of these two parameters. So it will be something like this. If we are on the right spot, so we have the correct values for the parameters, we have the maximum likelihood, and we minimize the error. But if we change the parameters away from that spot, then we start having lines that are falling away from our points, and the error will start increasing. And the way the algorithms do solve this problem of finding the best set of parameters is to start from some points, compute the derivative there, and then go along the derivative until you find the mean. And then start from this other point and repeat the process and so forth until, what did I press here? Okay. And then repeat the process and so forth until you minimize the error. So if we do that, this is what we get as the result. This is the set of parameters, θ1 and θ2, that control the slope and the position of the line, that minimize the quadratic error between each prediction and the value that we are finding. So the quadratic errors are all vertical here, measured between the line and the points for each x. And if we try to minimize that, we find this line. Now, one thing that you can tell immediately is that this does not seem to be a very good model. We are finding the best hypothesis in this hypothesis class, but this hypothesis class is probably not capturing well the structure of the data, because we have this curve here, and then we are only considering straight lines, so we cannot find anything that is not a straight line. So this is one problem that we often have. We need to find a good hypothesis class, or in practice, we need to find a good model. That is what we use to represent the hypothesis class, and the thing then that we work with to find the hypothesis. So let's see how we can add curves to this. Now, linear regression you can think of as something that is straight in some sense. In fact, when you go to the mathematical definition, it has more to do with how you can separate the different terms and so on. But we're going to try to focus on trying to understand and imagine these concepts. We can keep doing something that is linear and straight, but let's do a little trick here. We're going to add a new feature to the data. These points, we have only one feature value, which is x, the input, and we have one target value, the y. Let's describe our data with two feature values, two values of x. One is the original x, we'll call it x2, we keep the original x, but x1 is the square of the original x. So we now have a problem in 3 dimensions instead of 2. 2 of those dimensions will be the input, the two values of x and x squared, and y will still be the output that we're trying to predict. Now, if we use this nonlinear transformation, note that x squared is not linear, we project the data now into something that is curved in space. For example, this is not projecting very well, but this is the original x, so this would be x2 now. This is x1, which is the original x squared. And so the data on the x1, x2 plane, the data will now have this curve because each value here is squared on this axis. When you consider the y value here, it's also on this curve, so now all these points are on a curved surface that is above this curved line here. So we took our data and we projected it into 3 dimensions on a curved surface. And now we're going to do a linear regression again. But now we're going to do a linear regression in 3 dimensions with 3 parameters. So y is something multiplied by x1. x1 is the original x squared. Something plus something multiplied by x2, and then a constant. So we have the theta 1, theta 2, theta 3 to to adjust our model. And this model is describing something that is linear in 3 dimensions, which is a plane. So this model is describing the hypothesis class, which is the set of all planes in 3 dimensions. Once we find the plane, so this is a drawing here of the plane, we have these data points are coming here, coming down, and then going back along this curve. We adjust everything with this plane. And now we can project back into the original space where we only had x and y. And how can we do this? This is basically the intersection of this plane here that is coming out with this curve where we projected our feature values, our x, with this nonlinear transformation. And even though this plane is straight, when we transformed our data into a curved surface, now the intersection of the two is a curved line. And when we go back to the original dimensions, where we only have x and y, then this now represents a curve. So you see, we can generalize this. We can go to 4 dimensions, 6 dimensions, whatever we want. And this is basically the same as fitting a polynomial curve. Because you see, if we are using this x1 is actually x squared, and then x2 is x, this is y something multiplied by x squared, something multiplied by x, and then a constant. This is a second degree polynomial that we are fitting to the data. So you see, fitting a polynomial curve is also a form of linear regression, but we are transforming the data nonlinear into higher dimensions, doing the linear regression there, and then coming back. I'm talking about it this way because we're going to see that this is a recurring theme in lots of classifiers and regression algorithms, where we are actually doing something linear, so we keep the hypothesis class simple, but we transform the data in order to gain more power to adjust to our data. So this is what we can do if you want to do it in Python with the libraries that we're using. We import NumPy. NumPy is a library for numerical processing. Matplotlib, this pyplot is just to do the plots. So load.txt allows us to load the data. Let's imagine that we have these points in a CSV file separated by a semicolon. You can do this, load the data. This gives you a matrix which has each data point in a row, and the 2 columns are the x and the y. So we can separate the 2 columns. This is all the rows, column 0, all the rows, column 1. In Python, all the indexes start at 0. So the first column will be index 0, second column, index 1. And then we can use from the NumPy library this polyfit function that gives us the coefficients of the polynomial with this degree, in this case degree 2, that best fits this x value and y value. So this is basically what we need to load the data file and compute the coefficients of the polynomial. You'll do this kind of thing in the tutorials, and in the lectures I will show often some parts of code for mainly 2 reasons. One is that sometimes it's easier to understand the algorithms when we see some kind of implementation, or in other cases like this one, it's just to explain to you how you can play with these things a bit so that you can experiment and look at the results and so on. That may also help you understand things. Now this part seems a bit complicated, but it's just to draw the graph. And the idea is that if you want to draw a curved line, since the plot joins the different points with straight lines, you need a large set of points for it to appear smooth. So this is what I did here. I use this linspace function that you tell the first value, the last value, and the number of points, and it gives you a vector with all the points uniformly distributed along this interval. So I get 100 points to draw the curve. So these are 100 points along the x value. I compute for these 100 points all the y values using this polyval function. So basically, this polyval function receives the coefficients of the polynomials and the x and gives you the y. And now I can plot everything with a dash here to indicate that I want a line. And this is what does this curved line here. There are 100 points computed with the polynomial. To plot the data, I can do this. I will plot the x and y values with circles. This is the O there, and red is the color. So you can look up on Google easily this, the notation here, but you can do this plot. This is just to set the size of the axis, the title, and then to save the plot to a figure, so I can put it here on the slide. Okay. So basically, this is the general recipe if you want to look things up. Depending on what you're doing, if you're using IPython, you can do this interactively, so you have a graphical console. As soon as you do a plot, you see the results. If you're using Jupyter, you can also draw this in some cells and then you see the results. So depending on what you're doing, but if you want just to save things, this is what you'll have eventually to do for the assignment. So in general, I'll show this way of plotting and saving to a file. If you want to do it interactively, you'll also experiment with that in the tutorial. Okay? So this is what we have if we use a degree 2 polynomial, or if you want to think about it another way, we do this nonlinear transformation by adding x squared, and then we do a linear regression on 3 dimensions and go back to the beginning. But we can do this more. So basically what we're doing here is that we are keeping the same sort of inductive bias. That is, we are assuming that we can adjust things by a linear regression, but since this doesn't work in the original dimensions, we are going to add dimensions with nonlinear transformations and then keep using the same kind of linear straight hypothesis there to adjust to the data. So we are changing hypothesis classes by just adding new dimensions, but always keeping things straight. And this is what we can do to add more curvature to our hypothesis. For example, we can expand things to a polynomial of degree 3. Now we have another feature there, which is x cubed. So we're going to 4 dimensions and then doing the linear regression there and coming back to our 2 dimensions x, y originally. And now we have this curve. This seems to work better. But we can increase this. We can go to 6 dimensions, for example, adding all the way to x raised to the power of 5, or 16 dimensions, for example. In this way, we have 16 parameters to adjust our curve, and we go all the way to x raised to the power of 15. And now we can see that we are starting, even though, as you can see on these curves, the curves are always going closer to the data point, so we are improving our performance according to our measure, which is the squared error. Things are going to go closer to the data. But at some point this starts to become a bit ridiculous, because you see we are passing through all the points. This is working very well, but this is a very strange prediction. Our hypothesis is predicting that a point between these two will actually have this value of y, and this does not make sense. So this is an important problem in machine learning. You can, even though we are always using the same sort of inductive bias, which is let's do this straight, we are increasing the power by increasing the number of dimensions in that nonlinear transformation, and at some point we start getting something that is very suspicious. So we are doing very well in the data that we know, but if we want to use this to go outside the data, we are probably going to do a lot of mistakes. And this is also the idea of inductive bias. You need to constrain the kind of hypothesis that you admit in order to be able to extrapolate from what you know to what you want to predict. Okay? So this is a problem. It seems intuitive that going to degree 15 in this case is not a good idea, and this is what is called overfitting. We have a hypothesis class that is too loose, or our model is too powerful for the data that we have. So we can reduce the error a lot, we can adjust very well to the data, but then things start making sense and we lose the ability to extrapolate to outside the data. That is also, it gives us also the idea of the importance of inductive bias. So we need to find some way to balance these things. The error we get on the data that we're using to find the hypothesis and the error outside that data. And this is what we're going to see on the next lecture, next week, how to try to prevent overfitting and prevent getting carried away. So now what we saw is we started with this idea of classification and regression, but we focused on linear regression. And there are two important messages for this lecture. One is that even though we are keeping the same kind of hypothesis class, so we always keep things straight, we are trying to fit to do linear regression, fit to something that is straight, we can still increase the power of our model by doing those nonlinear transformations to higher dimensions. And this is something that we can do without limits. We can just add new features and our model is increasingly capable of adjusting to the data. However, there is a danger here. We can overfit the data and we have an hypothesis that is very good on the data that we know, but then doesn't work outside the data, and that's not what we want, because that will make it useless. Okay? So these are the two ideas that I wanted you to retain. You can take a look at Bishop in chapter 1. It also covers these examples, and there are some discussions here on these other books.